My sister's kids got the tutors, the $8,500 camps, the praise, while I got nothing. At Grandma's birthday dinner, she learned I'd legally transferred their precious trust into my name. She exploded, Dad froze, and one sentence from my aunt ended the night. Imagine discovering your entire family has been secretly siphoning off your future, turning a sacred educational trust into their own personal luxury fund. That kind of betrayal? It cuts deeper than anything, especially when it's your own blood. This isn't just a story about money. It's about what happens when love gets confused with control and fairness is seen as an act of war. I'm Miles, 32, the older brother, the only son. The one my parents called responsible when they wanted to delegate, and difficult the moment I said no. My small podcast about work and money, which I pour my life into, ironically makes people think I'm both a walking ATM and their personal therapist. My home is a tiny one-bedroom, shared with two mini poodles, a foam panel wall I built myself, and a coffee grinder I probably treat better than some of my relatives. This whole thing exploded at my grandmother's birthday, because of course it did. Her dining room was packed, tulle bows on every chair, a mountain of cupcakes, photos of Grandma stretching back decades, like a museum exhibit curated by my aunt. My sister, Leia, swept in late, her two kids in perfectly matching polos, and the whole room just tilted towards them like sunflowers. Make room for the golden ones. Aunt Bev sang, her voice syrupy. The future of this family. I was already exiled to the kids' table. Apparently, the main table needed balance. Grandma, bless her heart, just waved a hand at me. Miles, you're by the outlet. Perfect for your Pacho podcast. My dad clapped me on the shoulder, that familiar, condescending clap that felt like a participation ribbon. At least he's got a hobby. Then, the first trigger landed, clean as a slap. Leia leaned over the main table, kissed Grandma's cheek, and announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. We came straight from the tutor. 2 hours of Latin. And don't even ask what that camp cost. $8,500 for 4 weeks. Worth every penny for our college track. Everyone made those astonished noises, the kind people make when they're planning to repeat the number in the parking lot. My mom chimed in, practically beaming. And they have the college fund. Thank heavens. Your grandfather had such foresight. Leia, grinning, corrected her. Our college fund. The trust. Remember? She winked at Grandma. The way you flaunt it at dinner is iconic. Grandma let out a bell-like laugh. I do like to remind you children of your blessings. My phone was suddenly the most interesting thing in the room. I pretended to check the weather, but my blood was boiling. Across the table, Uncle Rob chirped. Miles, what's new with your episodes? Interviews, I mumbled. He nodded, like I'd just confirmed a dire diagnosis. Speaking of episodes, you should do one about parents who don't save for college. Thankfully, this family knows better. My mom echoed, thankfully, her eyes fixed on me as if gratitude itself had a face, and it definitely wasn't mine. Forks clinked. Someone put on a playlist. The speeches started. Grandma loved speeches. I stared at the Happy 78th Queen banner, trying to banish the folder on my laptop labeled Trust Final. I looked at Leia's kids. They were sweet enough, and then at the adults, who never seemed to grasp the difference between being generous and being performative. Then Grandma lifted her glass. To family, she announced, and to the grandchildren we invest in. A pause, a smile, and then the line that has echoed in my head since I was 12. Invest in the ones who matter. My mom laughed. Hear, hear. I pushed my chair back. Grandma, I started, trying to keep my voice mild. About the trust. Not now, sweetie, she said, her voice sugared. Let's not talk money at dinner. Leia smirked. We can talk later. You wouldn't understand the details anyway. I swallowed, my jaw tight. You'd be surprised. Money in our house was like the weather. Inescapable, always moving, and always someone's fault. When I was 12, Grandpa set up an educational trust for his grandchildren. Back then, that meant me and whoever came along later. The trust was a story Grandma loved to tell. We sacrificed for education, she'd say, looking at me like I was a lesson plan. We prioritized the ones who will make us proud. Then Leia had kids, and suddenly, grandchildren meant something that didn't include me at all. We grew up working class adjacent. 2 incomes, 1 inherited house, a savings account my mother called thin. Every time I wanted something, soccer cleats, a TI-84 calculator. Mom would sigh and say, "Ask your grandfather about the fund." He'd just chuckle and change the subject. We didn't use it. We displayed it, like the nice plates reserved for special occasions that never arrived. By 19, I was editing audio at 2 a.m. for a sports show that fired me via text. I worked barista shifts, taught myself to EQ earbuds, and cobbled together just enough web skills to post my podcast episodes at stupid o'clock. Leia, 2 years younger, had perfected the family tradition of being adored. "Miles is so intense," she'd say. "You should have fun." Fun, I realized, had a price tag. I had rent. When her first child arrived, the trust got loud. "Our golden grandbaby." Grandma would coo, tapping a manila folder. She'd tell waiters about the fund, like it was a dessert special. Private school, private tutor, private everything. $8,500 camp, darling. They learned STEM and sailing. Best 3 letters in this house, Roy. Meanwhile, I was Venmo requesting my dad for my own birthday dinner because he'd forgotten his wallet. I don't pretend I was perfect. I missed birthdays, canceled on Leia's brunches, ducked family photos. I was hustling and ashamed of it. My podcast scraped by, then grew, then dipped, then spiked. Ads started coming in. I learned how to read mid-rolls without sounding like a hostage. I started a Patreon. I paid off a credit card in a burst of joy so intense I cried into a towel. But the family script never changed. "Miles, your sister's kids have needs. Don't be selfish. Your podcast is cute." The first big fracture was the group chat incident. Leia dropped a picture of the kids with their tutor. The kids looked bored. The tutor looked rich. Leia typed, 2 hours a week, worth every penny. College path secured. Grandma replied with 8 clapping emojis. Then, "So glad we set up their trust young." I typed, "Wasn't the trust for all the grandchildren?" Mom jumped in. "Stop stirring, Miles. Leia, you don't even have kids." Grandma replied, "We're talking about actual grandchildren, dear." Actual grandchildren. I stared at that message until my phone screen locked. "Cool." I called Grandpa. His voice had grown thin. "It was meant to be fair," he said. "To help you both with education." Leia used it for camp. Camp can be educational. Can it be $8,500 educational? He sighed. "Talk to your grandmother." Talking to Grandma meant being told I was dramatic. She said I should be grateful the family had anything at all. "Don't be crass, Miles. College costs money." I said, "I went to college. I'm still paying interest." She replied, "Well, you chose audio." As if I'd chosen to be allergic to money on purpose. Then Grandpa died, and the trust, quiet for 6 months, woke up. At the will reading, there was a paragraph everyone else seemed to miss, except me. It named me and Leia as co-beneficiaries of an educational trust, with a successor trustee to be appointed by the co-beneficiaries in the event of mismanagement. I stared at mismanagement until the word blurred. I had receipts. The camp invoices. Leia bragged about private ski weekends for their development. The tutor package, renamed enrichment, in the bank memos Grandma wrote herself. I asked the lawyer if enrichment counted. He raised an eyebrow. If it's not post-secondary education or direct academic cost, it's arguably outside the trust purpose. Arguably, I repeated. He shrugged. If you care to argue. I did. And I didn't. My show was finally paying real money. I was finally sleeping. Did I want a war with my family? No. Did I want to stop being told I was less than actual family? Yes. So I read. I read trust law until the words felt like a second language. I learned about fiduciary duty and successor trustees and the difference between education and enrichment. I started a folder called Trust Drafts. I asked myself the question I asked guests on my show. What would this look like if you respected your future self? It looked like boundaries. It looked like tracking expenses. It looked like emails instead of phone calls. It looked like a paper trail. When I asked for statements, Grandma stalled. "The printer's broken, dear." Leia said, "This is so toxic." Mom said, "We were just keeping things simple." Simple meant me paying my own student loan while their kids learned Latin on my grandfather's dime. The tutor became a symbol. The camp argument. At a family dinner, Aunt Bev lifted her glass. "To our investor queen, Grandma Prin. I do love a portfolio." Then she recounted, in loving detail, how she'd negotiated the camp down from $9,200 to $8,500. Always be shrewd. she told the table. Protect principal. Protect principal? My stomach dropped. I walked to the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror until my face looked like a stranger's. Then I did what I do best, research. I found the clause. I found the path. I found a bank officer who used phrases like within scope and successor appointment. The trust language allowed a change in trustees with the consent of both beneficiaries, or if there was evidence of misuse, by petition with notice. Consent wasn't happening. Evidence. That was my whole life. Grandma's birthday fell on a Sunday. Everyone wore their church smiles. I wore a black button-down shirt I reserved for live recordings and funerals. At 2 p.m., the sheet cake arrived. At 2:15, Aunt Bev made her queen of compound interest toast. At 2:20, Leia announced the kids' camp recital. The tutor says they're gifted. She made gifted sound like a brand. Grandma basked. And we'll always make sure they have what they need. I'd promised myself I wouldn't do it during the soup course. I'd wait for coffee. But then Mom leaned across the table and said, Miles, you didn't forget Grandma's check, did you? Even a small one is fine. She did so much for you. A bitter laugh escaped me. For me? Don't be ungrateful, Dad said. No one likes a tally keeper. I set down my spoon. About the tally, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. We should talk. Leia rolled her eyes. Here we go. Grandma lifted her palm. Not at dinner. I opened my phone and turned the screen so only she could see it. It's already done. Her smile didn't slip at first. Then she focused. The bank email. The words, successor trustee accepted. My name. What is this? She whispered, her face losing color. The trust had a successor clause, I said, my voice small but steady. Misuse triggers it. The bank agreed. The lawyer filed notice. Effective last week. I'm the trustee. Leia laughed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. You? You don't even have kids. You wouldn't know what a child needs if it bit you. The trust isn't for camps, I said, cutting through her anger. It's for college. Post-secondary. Tuition. Books. I checked. Grandma's face finally cracked. You moved it into your name. Into my trusteeship. I corrected. Different. She stood so fast her chair screeched across the floorboards. How dare you? Conversations around the room stopped like someone had pulled the plug. Dad's fork dropped, the ping echoing in the sudden silence. Miles, he said, his voice low in that way he uses right before a lecture. Fix this. Mom's lips were a knife. After all we've done for you. Leia pointed a shaking finger at me. You're stealing from my kids. I kept my hands under the table so no one would see them shake. No one's stealing. The trust is intact. I'll approve college expenses. I'll pay tuition directly. But enrichment and $8,500 camps are out. Aunt Bev whispered, Is this legal? From the far end of the table, the quietest person in the room spoke. My aunt by marriage, Joy, who never raises her voice, said one sentence that sliced the air in half. Asked why the statements were hidden. Everything froze. Grandma blinked. Excuse me. Aunt Joy folded her napkin, deliberately. I asked for statements when I co-signed Leia's preschool deposit, remember? You told me the trust wasn't public. That's when I realized you weren't tracking properly. So yes. Asked why the statements were hidden. Leia whirled on her. Joy, not helpful. Joy didn't flinch. Helpful would have been following the rules. The room filled with noises, a glass set down too hard, a child's chair scraping, someone whispering. Oh my God. Grandma's voice returned, jagged. I did what was best. For whom? I asked. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You have always resented them. Them. I looked at the kids. The oldest one stared at his napkin, shoulders hunched around his ears. They're not the problem, I said. The rules are the rules. Dad stood. Give it back. It's not a piggy bank, I said, my voice firm. It's a trust. And I'm done being the villain because I know how to read. The fallout was a group text that felt like a fire alarm. First, Leia, you've humiliated us. The kids are crying. You've ruined Grandma's birthday. Then, Mom, you heartless boy, fix this or don't come around anymore. Then, Dad, call me. Man to man, we'll sort it out. I didn't call. I emailed. I wrote like a podcaster who edits out filler for a living. Clean, time-stamped, impossible to misread. I attached the trust document with the relevant sections highlighted. I attached the bank officer's note. I attached a summary of disallowed expenses, with a conciliatory paragraph that said I'd cover this semester's tutor out of my own pocket, so the kids wouldn't take the hit while the adults adjusted. Leah replied in 10 seconds. Keep your blood money. Joy wrote privately. Proud of you. This is the first non-crazy thing in this family since 2004. Grandma didn't text for 3 days. When she did, it was a voicemail that started with a sigh and morphed into a monologue about loyalty. She used words like betrayal, ungrateful, show off. She ended with, "You'll regret this when you have your own." I pressed the message into the silence of my apartment and let it sit there, like a sticky note on my desk. Respect your future self. I opened my bank app, paid my student loan, then closed it without taking a screenshot, for once. The show went on. I recorded an episode about boundary budgets, how to allocate money and attention when your family runs on expectations. The inbox exploded. People told me about cousins who used grandma's medical fund for a destination wedding, about brothers who bought jet skis with college money. I cried twice, muted my mic, and kept going. A week later, Dad called. "Son," he said, overly warm. "Can we meet at the diner?" I chose a public place and arrived early. He slid into the booth, ordered coffee he didn't drink, then leaned forward. "Your grandmother is upset." I noticed. He rubbed his eyes. "She feels disrespected." I moved the trustee role per the clause. "I know." He tried for a smile. "Look, maybe we could make a family agreement. You put your sister back in charge. We'll all forgive and forget. You can even be a co-signer if that makes you feel respected." The way he said respected made me want to flip the table. I didn't. I breathed, like my therapist taught me. "Dad, we can use it for tuition, fees, books. Anything else is a no. That's the agreement." He sat back. "You sound like your show." "That's not an insult." He exhaled, then tried a different route. "Your grandmother's afraid of losing face. She lost track. Those are different. Family is messy. So is math." He stared at me. "I don't recognize you lately." I finally recognized myself. The door chimed. A busboy laughed. Life continued. We settled into a new rhythm. Beige holidays without me. Texts I didn't answer right away. Uninvites disguised as "we thought you'd be busy." I sent the school their 1,099 Q forms. I sent the university bursar an email confirming direct tuition payment when the time came. Leah sent me a screenshot of an unpaid enrichment invoice with the caption, "Monster." I didn't reply. Then a weird thing happened. My cousin Nate, quiet, anxious, always on the edge of family group photos, called me. "I heard what you did," he said. "It made me ask my parents about my 529. He paused. "There isn't one. I'm sorry. I'm not calling to dump on you. I'm calling because hearing you say no gave me permission to ask. And now I'm opening my own account. Even if it's $50 a month." We talked about compounding interest. I sent him my budgeting spreadsheet. He sent me a picture of his dog in a sweater. It was the best conversation I'd had with a relative in years. The day tuition came due for Leah's oldest, I paid it directly to the university and CC'd Leah, my parents, and Grandma. No note, no flourish, just a copy of the transaction and the balance remaining. Leah wrote back, "Fine," which in our family was a peace treaty. Grandma stayed nuclear. She asked friends at church for prayer for a wayward grandson. Aunt Bev sent me passive-aggressive memes about honoring your elders. Mom tried guilt by dessert. She left a cake at my door. The frosting said, "Family first." It melted slightly in the afternoon sun and looked like a horror prop. I took a photo, then ate a corner and threw the rest out. My therapist asked how I was sleeping. "Better," I said. I felt unhooked. Not free, exactly, but unstuck, on air. I told a story about financial gaslighting on my podcast. When people tell you that enforcing rules is cruel, that budgets are betrayals, I said, setting a boundary doesn't make you hard, it makes you honest. The episode charted. A sponsor asked to extend. The team I'd assembled, 2 part-timers, 1 editor, sent confetti emojis. I bought them lunch. "Sometime in there," Grandma texted. "If you insist on playing banker, at least visit." I went. She poured tea like it was an apology, then didn't apologize. We sat in her over-decorated living room, floral everywhere, gold frames reflecting back a dozen versions of us. "You hurt me," she said. "You embarrassed me," I replied. "Is that what you wanted?" "Revenge?" she asked. "No," I said. "I wanted fairness." She tapped the table. Fairness is not the same as love. I know, I said. That's why I chose fairness. Love gets confused in this family. She looked at me for a long time. You are so sure. I'm sure about this. Do you think you're better than us? I think I'm allowed to be equal. She looked away, blinked hard, and changed the subject to hydrangeas. We talked about flowers for 10 minutes, and I left feeling like I'd escaped a maze without a map. Grandma's birthday lives rent-free in my head, but it doesn't burn like it did. Now, when I think of that day, I remember my aunt's sentence more than Grandma's scream. Asked why the statements were hidden. It's the kind of question I ask strangers on my show every week. It cut through the noise. Here's what changed. I stopped treating peace as my job. I stopped auditioning for actual grandchild. I stopped calling fairness cruelty. I learned that a quiet no is louder than a loud yes, especially in families that only hear applause. I also learned that protecting kids doesn't mean bankrupting boundaries. I paid a university bill without sending a selfie, and the world didn't end. I refused to fund a camp and survive the group chat. Leia has not forgiven me. She might not for years. That's not a tragedy. That's a recalibration. The moral isn't to win the argument. The moral is to own the responsibility you're already carrying. For me, that meant reading the document everyone referenced like scripture and following it like a map. It meant telling the truth in a room that prefers a good story. It meant remembering that the person I have to live with most is me. I'm still Miles. I still oversalt my eggs and line up my XLR cables by length. I still record on Tuesday mornings, edit on Wednesday nights, and drink coffee like it's a hobby. Sometimes I think about how different the story would sound if Grandma had led with, "I messed up." Maybe we would have laughed about the $8,500 sailing lessons in 20 years. Maybe not. The kids? I'm rooting for them. I hope they learn Latin and how to call a boundary by its name. I hope they never learn to equate love with a check. When they're ready for college, the money will be there, because that's what the trust was for. And when they ask me why the camp got a no, I'll show them the clause and say, I respected your future, even when your parents hated me for it. Last week, I got a message from a listener. She wrote, I told my brother I'm not his bank anymore. I put it in writing. I slept for the first time. I smiled in my kitchen, overbrewed coffee in my hand, phone buzzing with small thank yous from strangers. It felt like proof that doing the right thing rarely looks heroic in the moment. It looks like paperwork. It looks like somebody yelling at a birthday party. It looks like leaving a cake on a hot porch and walking away. I'm not the family ATM. I'm not the scapegoat. I'm not the villain in a story about actual grandchildren. I'm a person with limits. I put my name on a line I used to pretend wasn't there, and I'm keeping it there. I won't be used. I won't finance the performance. I'll pay what's owed. I'll document what's said. And I'll keep my hands under the table until they stop shaking. Then I'll pick up the mic, hit record, and tell the truth.